In the Yuan clan's ancestral residence on Erlang Alley, Cui Chan was seated on his chair with his entire body drenched in blood, while his hands were locked in the treasure bottle seal as he fought arduously to prevent his body from disintegrating. He was doing this not just because this body had been extremely difficult to come by, but even more so because this body was like a prison in which his soul was confined. In the near future, he would be unable to release his soul to go on long journeys as he had been able to back in the capital city of the Great Li Empire. Furthermore, if this body were to be destroyed, then he would be reduced to an incomplete entity with his souls and senses split apart, and that would permanently relegate him to the bottom of the middle 5 tiers. If that were to happen, then all of the people who previously groveled in fear at his feet would have been able to kill him with ease. Even though his body and mental state had both been dealt heavy blows, Cui Chan still forced himself to his feet after throwing up a mouthful of blood. He was grabbing onto the armrest of his chair and leaning heavily onto it for support, while his entire body trembled uncontrollably. He knew that the worse the state that he was in, the harder he had to cling on to what little he had left. He raised his head to look up at the sky, where Ruan Qiong's voice had rung out earlier, but at this point, he didn't even have the power to use the mystical ability through which he could communicate with Ruan Qiong in secret. "Come here," Cui Chan commanded in a raspy voice. A young boy with a set of intricate and flawless features emerged from a side room with a horrified expression, and he made his way over to Cui Chan, where he was rooted to the spot, at a complete loss for what to do. Cui Chan had faith in the spies under his command, but he only had faith in their loyalty to him, and he had no faith at all in their abilities. Hence, he didn't dare to place his hopes on them, and expect them to keep him safe on a journey back to the capital city. There was a very good chance that he would be targeted by a certain pawn planted among the 4 surnames and 10 clans by Song Chongjing, or that woman even before he had a chance to make it out of the town. With that in mind, Cui Chan instructed, "Go to the blacksmith shop and ask Master Ruan to pay me a visit. Tell him that I have something to ask of him, and that I'm willing to make a huge deal with him on a matter related to the assignment of a mountain god to Divine Elegance Mountain. If you can't convince him to come and see me, then there's no need for you to come back. Without my intervention, the soul that I've temporarily gathered and placed in your body will only be able to last a few days before it dissipates." The boy's face was deathly pale as he hurriedly nodded in response. Cui Chan sat back down onto his chair in a defeated manner, then continued, "Make sure to act more natural when you go out. Don't go walking around looking like your parents just died. Otherwise, even an idiot will figure out that something's happened to me." The boy nodded fearfully in response, then quickly departed. Meanwhile, Cui Chan closed his eyes, and the irony of his situation wasn't lost on him. In his current state, not only was he forced to imprison his soul in this body, he had to make running repairs on this self-imposed prison to restrict himself even further. Right at this moment, the sound of familiar footsteps rang out, and Cui Chan immediately opened his eyes. Right as he was about to scold his puppet for its incompetence, he caught sight of the uninvited guest beside the porcelain boy, and he immediately put on a welcoming smile as he instructed, "Go and bring Senior Yang a chair and some tea." Old Man Yang was smoking his pipe with one hand clasped behind his back, and he averted his gaze from the miserable and disheveled Cui Chan as he inspected his surroundings, then said with a smile, "You personally set up the restrictions here. Yet you were somehow oblivious to the fact that I've essentially broken into your house through your front door. Have you encountered some trouble? Do you need me to lend you a hand?" "There's no need for that," Cui Chan replied as he shook his head with a calm expression. Old Man Yang sat down onto the chair brought to him by the young boy, and he was seated in the eastern direction, while Cui Chan was seated in the north, directly facing the plaque of the main hall in the south. Old Man Yang took a glance at the timid yet curious young boy, and he mused, "You really are quite talented when it comes to soul manipulation. Is Ruan Qiong able to hear our conversation right now?" Cui Chan asked. "Are you not aware of Ruan Qiong's personality? Why would he go out of his way to eavesdrop on you? If you hadn't repeatedly provoked him, he wouldn't have even taken a second glance at you." Old Man Yang chuckled. "Caution is the key to longevity," Cui Chan mused in a solemn voice. This was the second time that Cui Chan had said this to Old Man Yang, and the first time was back at the old mountain of porcelain. "That's true," Old Man Yang acknowledged before taking a puff of his pipe. Chui Chan waited momentarily in silence, then asked, "Are we all right to continue now?" Old Man Yang nodded in response. "Go ahead and say whatever you please." Chui Chan wiped away the blood seeping down from the corners of his lips with the back of his hand, then asked, "Should I refer to you as the Azure Child Heavenly Lord, or should I use your even more renowned title?" "That's enough." Old Man Yang cut him off in an expressionless manner. Chui Chan knew that it was unwise to push his luck any further, and he was silent for a moment before remarking, "Truth be told, that battle still remains the stuff of legends in my heart." He then suddenly burst into laughter for some reason as he continued, "I don't regret not meeting the gods, my only regret is that the gods don't know of me." This was my genuine reaction when I first became aware of the secrets lurking behind the scenes while I was studying under my teacher. At the time, my teacher scolded me for my arrogance. Thinking back now, he was right and I was wrong. Old Man Yang waved a dismissive hand as he said, "I have no interest in hearing about how you turned on your teacher or your fellow brother. In that case, did you come here just to ridicule me?" Chui Chan asked with a mocking sneer. "No, I'm merely curious about something. Song Chongjing of the Greatly Empire is a martial artist who possesses both the aspirations and the potential to become an 11th tier martial artist. So why are you such sworn enemies with him?" Old Man Yang asked. Chui Chan shook his head in response. "I don't have any personal vendetta against Song Chongjing. Instead, it's because there's a powerful woman in the Greatly Empire who resents him. She was the one who had orchestrated the shattering of Chan Pingan's bonded porcelain, and she did this so that it would be easier for her son to grasp onto his fated opportunity. Of course, I won't deny that I took advantage of the situation so that I could use Chan Pingan to target Qi Jingchan, and this was one of the few strokes of genius that I've made in my entire life. Qi Jingchan played a superior game to mine, and I concede my defeat to him. But I still don't think this was a bad move." Old Man Yang puffed out a cloud of smoke, and his eyes narrowed slightly as he mused. After his bonded porcelain was shattered, Chan Pingan became like a flame that attracted attention from all sides, so there were inevitably going to be some moths that tried to rush at the flame. The woman that you were referring to was correct in her predictions. Initially, that girl who was manifested by the residual will and essence of that true dragon instinctively made Chan Pingan her target. However, only after escaping from that dragon-locking well, and stumbling to Chan Pingan's residence on Clay Vase Alley, did she detect the rich dragon Qi present in Song Jisen's house. For her, that was the most alluring delicacy under the heavens, so she desperately wanted to knock on the gate of Song Jisen's courtyard. But in the end, she ran out of energy and collapsed in the snow in front of Chan Pingan's house. After that, she was saved by Chan Pingan, but she was unwilling to establish a contract with a mere mortal like him, as doing so was no different from committing suicide. Hence, she proclaimed that she was Song Jisen's new maidservant, and thus Chan Pingan foolishly handed over the greatest fated opportunity in this entire jewel's small world. Come to think of it, at the time Chan Pingan really was like the very embodiment of misfortune. He was obstructed by the heavenly Tao at every turn, and it seemed that no fortune would ever befall him. Chui Chan listened to Old Man Yang's musings in silence, then returned to the subject at hand as he said, "Even His Majesty is convinced that his brother, Song Chongjing, has never had any interest in the throne. One time, His Majesty asked me to play a teaching game of Go with him, and that woman was also present to provide His Majesty with good moves so that the game didn't end too quickly. All of a sudden, His Majesty asked me if there could ever come a day when Song Chongjing would suddenly storm back to the capital city with his army and demand that he concede the throne. Of course, I gave an honest reply, reassuring him that Song Chongjing would never do something like this. But what if there really does come a day when Song Chongjing's subordinates decide that they want to help Song Chongjing seize the throne? At some point, he'll reach the 10th tier, or even the legendary 11th tier, and life will become very boring for him. With all of his subordinates urging him to seize the throne, who's to say that he won't give in to the temptation someday and decide to rebel?" After hearing my reply, His Majesty began to laugh, and he then turned to the woman beside him to ask her opinion on the matter, to which she replied that His Majesty didn't possess sufficient ambition, and that just half of Eastern Treasured Vile Continent would be enough to satisfy him. However, Song Chongjing is different. The further he advances down the path of cultivation, the loftier his aspirations will become. After hearing what she had to say, His Majesty jokingly said that we should have been executed on the charges of treason for what we just said. But it was an auspicious day that was unfit for executions, so he would spare us for the moment. Song Chongjing must have done some terrible deeds in his past lives to have been struck by the misfortune of having to deal with such a devious pair of opponents. One of them is constantly bad-mouthing him by His Majesty's bedside, while the other is a trusted subordinate of His Majesty's. Old Man Yang chuckled. Why exactly have you come here today? Chui Chan asked in a direct and straightforward manner. In response, Old Man Yang said something completely inexplicable and unrelated. We believe that fate dictates the trajectory of one's life, yet you don't share the same belief. Chui Chan was completely unyielding on this subject, and despite how vulnerable he was in his current situation, he didn't display any fear or timidity at all as he sneered. I don't have a very high opinion of the current batch, but I have an even lower opinion of you and the others. Old Man Yang set his gaze on Chui Chan, then prompted. Tell me what Qi Jingchun has selected Chan Ping'an to do for him. Why don't you take a guess? Chui Chan asked with a faint smile. It was clear that he wasn't going to reveal the answer to this question no matter what, as it concerned the integrity of his Dao heart. Do you really think I won't kill you? Old Man Yang asked. Chui Chan nodded in response. You wouldn't dare. Even a dog that I raised from birth would perhaps be willing to kill me for its own benefit, but you are the only one who wouldn't dare to kill me. A faint smile appeared on Old Man Yang's face as he chuckled. If you're this smart, how did you lose to Qi Jingchun? Chui Chan slumped back against his chair as he replied in a self-deprecating voice. To answer that question, I can use a quote from Qi Jingchun himself. Those who are pure of heart are the most unpredictable people in this world. Old Man Yang shook his head as he sighed. You see? This is what you get for not believing in fate. It's inexplicable, intangible, and impossible to grasp. Chui Chan burst into laughter. Are you trying to persuade me to walk your path? Don't you want to return to the peak of your powers? Old Man Yang countered. Besides, the path that you currently follow is not one that doesn't share similarities with ours. Chui Chan was so amused by this that was laughing to the point of tears, and he pointed a trembling finger at Old Man Yang as he openly jeered. I may not be able to compare with my teacher or Qi Jingchun, but you want me to become a lapdog for those bastards that I look down on, allowing them to order me around as they please just so I can attain a so-called indestructible Vajra body? Am I insane, or are you the insane one? I don't mean to be rude, but just how desperate are you? Could it be that you're also in the same situation as I am, in that a certain plan that you've been working on for a very long time has been ruined by some unforeseen development? Who do you think can order me around as they please? Old Man Yang asked in a nonchalant voice. Chui Chan suddenly narrowed his eyes with a solemn expression and fell completely silent. Meanwhile, Old Man Yang sat with his legs crossed, looking up at the sky with a calm expression. It was often said that there were gods in the heavens above, but in reality that was no longer the case. Chui Chan took a deep breath, then said, Let me give you a piece of advice. If you've done something to Chan Ping'an, then I suggest you abandon your plans right away. Old Man Yang shook his head in response. I haven't done anything to him. Chui Chan smiled as he continued. I presume Qi Jingchun cleaned up everything before he died, and given that neither you nor I are planning anything, it seems like Chan Ping'an no longer has anyone to worry about in high-up places aside from that woman in the capital. I can see that there's no way for us to walk the same path, but that's fine. We can still make a fair trade, Old Man Yang suddenly said. Chui Chan didn't even bother to ask what Old Man Yang had in mind before replying without any hesitation. I accept. After walking for about 2.5 kilometers, Chan Ping'an encouraged Li Baoping to take a break. The second break came after 2 more kilometers, and the third break was taken after another further 1.5 kilometers, where the two of them sat down onto the smooth rocks on the bank of the creek. In order to travel southward, they had to temporarily take a long route and follow the creek. Otherwise, given how difficult the mountains were to traverse, there was no way that Li Baoping would be able to keep up. She possessed far superior stamina to other children of her age, but ultimately, she was still only a little girl who was about 8 or 9 years old, so there was no way she could compare with an adult, and Chan Ping'an knew that he couldn't go as fast as he would if he were traveling alone. Li Baoping was sitting by the creek, sweating profusely, and she noticed Chan Ping'an suddenly taking off his straw sandals before rolling up the legs of his pants before wading into the water. Due to the fact that the stream was quite wide here, the water had become a lot more shallow, only reaching up to his knees, and there were many little green fish around the same length as a human hand swimming through the water in a nimble fashion. Ever since the first time Li Baoping waded into the creek, she had dreamed of being able to catch fish someday, but these fish were far more cunning than crabs and prawns, and they were far too difficult for her to catch. In the past, she had learned from others, cutting down a bamboo tree in secret to make a fishing rod, but for some reason, even though she was using the exact same rig consisting of a rod, line, and worms for bait, she was never able to fish up anything from the creek. She would often hide under the shade of the trees on the bank of the creek and fish for entire afternoons, but for no return at all. During the same periods of time, other people would have already had many foxtail weeds laden with strung-up fish, or had fish overflowing from their baskets, upon which they would joyfully return to show their parents their spoils, yet Li Baoping would remain completely without luck. In contrast, Qian Ping'an seemed to be able to do everything, from traversing the mountains and creeks, to burning charcoal, picking medicinal herbs, and catching fish and snakes. There was hardly anything that he couldn't do. Hence, she held a great deal of admiration for him. But she had only ever revealed this secret to Shi Chuanjia before. This time Li Baoping saw Qian Ping'an select a spot near the shore, where there was a large rock that many of the fish liked to hide under. After that, he began to construct a dam of sorts slightly upstream, and the dam was roughly as long as Li Baoping's height. The dam was entirely constructed from rocks of different sizes that Qian Ping'an had sourced from near the creek, and there was still water flowing downstream through the gaps in the dam, but Qian Ping'an was in no hurry to block those gaps with smaller rocks or sand. Instead, he constructed 2 more dams, one horizontal and one vertical, and the final product resembled a miniature moat. Li Baoping made her way over to the bank of the creek near Qian Ping'an, then squatted down, watching intently as Qian Ping'an began to fill the gaps. His movements were lightning fast and teeming with a sense of artistry. At the same time, she noticed that while working on the dams, Qian Ping'an's expression was extremely calm and focused, and he was fully immersed in the task, allowing no distractions to divert his attention. This was the same type of single-minded focus that Li Baoping had seen in Mr. Qi the first time that she saw him write, and for some reason, it was a very cathartic sight to behold. After the dam up above was filled to the point that it was virtually watertight, Qian Ping'an did the same to the dam off to the side. The dam that was downstream was only there to prevent fish from getting away, so it wasn't filled to be as watertight as the other 2 dams. Hence, the water level in the makeshift pond was gradually falling. Li Baoping's delicate features were glowing with elation as she clenched her fists tightly while praying in her heart, and even though she was resting on the shore, she was even more tense and anxious than Qian Ping'an. Qian Ping'an made his way into the pond, then began to scoop water out of it with his hands. Qian Ping'an, what you're doing right now is exactly what's described by the idiom draining a pond to catch fish, Li Baoping remarked. Wait, that's an idiom with negative connotations. I should be describing this as pulling the rug out instead. Qian Ping'an smiled as he casually asked, I often see you fishing by the creek. What's the biggest fish you've caught? Li Baoping heaved a forlorn sigh. The fish are too smart. All I can do is use a foxtail weed to goad crabs out of their holes. Fishing is too hard. Qian Ping'an was quite amused to hear this, and he asked, Did you make your fishing rod yourself? Li Baoping nodded vigorously in response. I did. There's a bamboo forest in a corner of your backyard, and apparently it was planted by my great-great-grandfather, so my father was very protective of it. When I told him that I was going to make a fishing rod, he refused. In the end, I had to go to great lengths just to cut one down in secret before grinding it down bit by bit with a pair of scissors. I was exhausted by the end. The water in the pond was becoming murkier and murkier, and there were already fish beginning to escape, splashing water everywhere. Qian Ping'an was already accustomed to this, and he smiled as he asked, Bamboo isn't that thin to begin with, did you remove the tip as well? Li Baoping was rather befuddled to hear this, and she replied, I did. I was afraid that if the fishing rod was too thin, it would snap if I hooked onto a big fish. If I have to cut down another bamboo tree to make a second fishing rod, even if I don't get beaten by my father, just the thought of having to grind it down with those scissors again is enough to give me a headache. An amused look appeared on Qian Ping'an's face as he said, Who uses a bamboo stick for fishing? None of the fish in our creek are all that large, so if you have too thick a fishing rod, You won't be able to detect whether a fish has been hooked, or if it's just nibbling at the bait. The first few times they strike, they'll never chomp fully down onto the bait. They're not stupid. If you swing your rod up too early, then there's no way you'll be able to hook them. A fishing rod has to be of moderate thickness, and there are all types of factors that you have to consider, including the season, the weather, the location, the hook, and the bait. Li Baoping was completely bewildered by what she was hearing, and her mouth was gaped wide open. At the same time, she was feeling a little embarrassed as there was something else that she had refrained from telling Chen Pingyan, which was that the hook she had attached to the end of her line was one that she had made by bending a sewing needle. Thinking back now, it was probably so large that the fish couldn't even swallow it if they tried. She could only console herself internally, telling herself that her ignorance was justifiable given her tender age. Chen Pingyan could see that she was feeling a little dejected, so he could only offer her some words of consolation. I feel like it's even more impressive that you weren't able to catch a single fish even after all these years. Li Baoping's eyes immediately lit up upon hearing this, and it was as if a knot in her heart had suddenly been untied, leaving her feeling elated and reinvigorated. "Why are we catching fish?" she asked with a curious expression. "We still have so much to eat," Chen Pingyan explained. "There's an expression that states that even a mountain of food can eventually be exhausted if it's never replenished. If that applies even to a mountain of food, then how can we possibly expect our 2 little baskets of food to last if we're not careful and conservative? We still have a very long way to go, so we need to conserve food as much as possible." Li Baoping nodded in agreement to this sentiment, following which an eager look appeared on her face as she said, "As the saying goes, give someone a fish and you'll feed them for a day, but teach them to fish and you'll feed them for a lifetime, so you can teach me how to making fishing rods and catch fish in the future." "Catch?" Chen Pingyan casually caught a red and green fish, then tossed it at Li Baoping, watching with amusement as she juggled it in a panic. He then said, "You're still too young, so just do what you can. There's no need to try and compete with me in everything. My job is to ensure that you arrive safely at Mountain Cliff Academy, so you can receive an education." After a mighty struggle, Li Baoping finally caught the fish securely in her hands, and she said in a justified manner, "That's incorrect. Mr. Qi told us that an accomplished scholar needs to not only read countless books, but also travel extensively. There are only 5 books in my basket, so I need to go to the academy to read the rest, but traveling is something that I also need to do as a scholar. There's an idiom that states that one needs to learn while traveling, which means that I need to carry my bookcase while traveling this vast world. And learning from books and learning from practical experience are both indispensable parts of a complete education. If I'm missing either of those 2 elements, then my education would be incomplete. There are a lot of foxtail weeds around you. You can pass them through the fish's gills if you want to string them together. If you're afraid of the weed snapping, then you can use 2 or 3 at once." While teaching Li Baoping how to string together the fish, he asked, "Does learning while traveling refer to carrying a bookcase around? The type that Chan Songfeng from Dragon Tail County was carrying? That one was woven from bamboo, and it looked really nice. If we pass by a bamboo forest during our trip, I can make one for you. I'll be needing a fishing rod anyway. If we're going to be traveling along the creek, then we'll have to derive our sustenance from the water, and if we go further from here, the water will become deeper, so we won't be able to catch fish using this method anymore." Li Baoping was squatting on the shore, stringing together the fish tossed at her one by one, and as soon as she heard this, she was so elated that she immediately jumped up as she exclaimed, "Really?" Chen Pingyan smiled as he confirmed, "Why would I lie to you? Hey, be careful. Quit jumping around or you're going to fall into the creek with the fish. The fish aren't going to be able to get away, but what if you catch a cold?" Li Baoping did as she was told, squatting back down as she said with a radiant smile, "I'm so happy. I'm finally going to have my very own bookcase." Chen Pingyan was crouched down in the makeshift pond, where the water level was so low that the creek was almost visible, and his head was pressed tightly against the rock as he reached under it to grab fish. This kind of fish can be eaten raw after it's dried under the sun. If you feel like it's dirty, I can remove the internal organs for you. Personally, I used to just eat this type of fish whole. After some internal conflict, Li Baoping said in a timid voice, "Can you remove the internal organs for me?" Chen Pingyan pulled out another fish from under the rock, then tossed it onto the grassy bank as he replied, "It's up to you. I'll take care of it. No, I can do it, Li Baoping hurriedly said. At this point, she was already holding 3 strings of fish. Chen Pingyan nodded in response, then continued to grab more fish from under the rock. Moments later, a loud splash suddenly rang out, and Li Baoping was bawling her eyes out as she stood in the water. Chen Pingyan hurriedly stood up and rushed over to her, then asked with an anxious expression, "What's wrong?" Li Baoping was absolutely distraught as she bawled. "There was a fish that looked like it was about to die, so I pulled it off from the foxtail weed, but as soon as I placed it in the water, it swam away. I couldn't catch it." Chen Pingyan was very amused to hear this, and he bent down to roll up the soaked legs of her pants, then gently cradled her onto the bank before telling her to take off her shoes and leave the fish to him. Li Baoping did as she was told, obediently taking off her shoes, but she still felt like she had done something terrible, and it was as if the sky were about to collapse on her. Meanwhile, Chen Pingyan began to process the fish in a well-rehearsed manner, slicing open their bellies before removing their innards. At the same time, he was trying his best not to laugh as he didn't want to throw salt onto Li Baoping's wounds. Finally, he turned to Li Baoping, then gently raised the 3 strings of fish with their innards removed. It was a huge haul, and a smile broke through Li Baoping's sobs. Despite the tear streaks all over her face, she was elated as she exclaimed, "We still have so many left, even though one of them got away." Chen Pingyan made his way over to her side before taking a seat, then handed her the 3 strings of fish as he patted her on the head. "That's right, so you don't have to be so sad if something like this happens again." Li Baoping raised the 3 strings of fish so that they were level with her eyes, and she replied in a joyful voice, "All right. I can weave a few pairs of straw sandals for you at some point. I guarantee you they won't give you blisters," Chen Pingyan offered. Li Baoping's eyes were glowing as she asked, "Really?" Chen Pingyan leaned down to wring out the water that had soaked into the legs of her pants as he replied, "It's really simple. You know how to do everything while I don't know how to do anything." Li Baoping sighed. Chen Pingyan smiled as he said, "You can teach me to read and write. I don't know that many characters right now, only around 500. Li Baoping immediately nodded in response. "You can count on me." The two of them sat side by side watching the slow-moving water in the creek, and Li Baoping suddenly asked, "Do you know what this creek is called?" "Dragon Whisker Creek." "How do you know that?" "Last time I entered the mountains I had a pair of maps. Master Yuan told me that they were maps of Dragon Spring County, and the creek was annotated as Dragon Whisker Creek on the map. However, once the direction of its flow changes from southeast to south, the red line on the map gradually thickened, and its name changed into the Iron Talisman River." "I see. Let me tell you how all of this works. Our Great Li Empire's imperial court has 6 ministries, and the Ministry of Rights has 3 types of officials, namely the Heaven Official, the Earth Official, and the Humanitarian Official. Among them, the Earth Official is responsible for making these maps. However, they receive assistance from the Fenghuo Masters of the Ministry of Astronomy, who lead the way for the Earth Officials during their exploration of the world. Essentially, they measure out every single inch of an empire's territory with their own 2 feet before transferring what they see onto maps. Aren't those Earth Officials and Fenghuo Masters really amazing? Do you want to become an Earth Official or a Fenghuo Master once you grow up? Chen Pingyan, don't you know that women can't become officials? And that's not just the case in our Great Li Empire, it seems to be that way everywhere else as well. Girls like Shichuanjia and I can receive education, but I've never heard of any woman becoming a teacher or being referred to as a scholar." "I see. By the way, you said that the jade hairpin you're wearing right now was given to Mr. Qi by his teacher, then given to you by Mr. Qi, right?" "That's right. In that case, from now on, I'm going to call you Junior Uncle." "Why?" "Once you become my Junior Uncle, even if I do something to make you mad at me, your conscience won't allow you to abandon me. You'll think to yourself, Li Baoping looks up to me and admires me as her Junior Uncle. I can't just leave her behind. Can I not be your Junior Uncle? Even if I'm not your Junior Uncle, I still won't leave you behind." "No. In that case, I won't make a bookcase or any straw sandals for you. I don't care. I'm calling you Junior Uncle no matter what. As my Junior Uncle, you'll have an obligation to make a bookcase and straw sandals for me." If Chen Pingyan were on his own, He would have been able to traverse around 50 kilometers of mountain path in a day without much difficulty, even if he were carrying a load. On their journey they had to negotiate a variety of terrains, such as bodies of water and rugged cliffs. Hence, due to the fact that he had to cater to Li Baoping, this was turning out to be a very leisurely trip for Chen Ping'an, so he decided to make use of his time to practice walking meditation. With Li Baoping by his side, he refrained from practicing the fist technique that required full focus and exertion. Instead, his movements were more languid and natural, and he even had to intentionally slow down in his walking meditation and shorten his strides so that Li Baoping could keep up. He had only just begun to find his way in his practice, but due to these self-imposed restrictions, all of his movements were feeling quite strange and awkward again. At this point, the two of them had already traveled around 10 kilometers, but Li Baoping was still raring to go, not displaying any signs of strain or exhaustion. She wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand as she asked, "Are you practicing fist techniques, junior uncle?" "That's right," Chen Ping'an replied with a nod as he paused in his walking meditation. Li Baoping then asked, "Do you know what the key acupoint of this set of fist techniques is?" Chen Ping'an was very perplexed by this question and he asked, "What does that mean?" "All I know is that there are many acupoints in the human body. The majority of the characters I've learned come from memorizing the names of these acupoints, but what do they have to do with fist techniques? I haven't had a chance to ask anyone about this. There was a girl by the name of Ning Yao who once looked at my fist techniques guide, but she didn't tell me anything about this. All she said was that there were no shortcuts to practicing fist techniques, and that consistent hard work was the only way to make solid progress. Ruan Xiu told me that as a swordswoman, the qi circulation route passed down in Ning Yao's clan must be kept secret from outsiders, and that's why she didn't delve too deep into this subject with me at the time." Chen Ping'an had thought that he was destined to spend his entire life in the town, so there would have been plenty of time to ask Ruan Xiu these questions, and that was why he hadn't been in a hurry to find out these things. Li Baoping's eyes widened with incredulity as she exclaimed, "Junior uncle, do you know how dangerous it is to be practicing fist techniques without this knowledge? Practicing fist techniques willy-nilly could easily result in severe repercussions. Practicing martial arts is just like a feng shui master searching for desirable locations. Except as opposed to searching for the acupoints of mountains and rivers, martial artists search for the prized points in their own bodies. Even after finding those points, you still have to adopt a correct method, and only then can you be considered to have truly embarked on the path of martial arts cultivation. You can't keep going like this, junior uncle. I have to teach you about all of this before you can continue practicing your fist techniques." Chen Ping'an could see that Li Baoping was quite serious about this, and after some consideration, he decided that this wasn't a bad thing. There just so happened to be an old willow tree with a crooked trunk up ahead, and most of the trunk was leaning over the surface of the creek, making it resemble an incomplete bridge. Hence, he led Li Baoping over to lean against the trunk of the tree for some rest, but she insisted on sitting on the tree. Hence, Chen Ping'an could only lift her up onto the tree trunk, while he stood off to the side to catch her if she fell. Li Baoping sat casually on the tree with an animated expression, looking much like a little schoolteacher teaching her first lesson. She cleared her throat as she prepared to give Chen Ping'an a good lesson, lest he strayed down the wrong path and ruined his own body through the use of incorrect cultivation methods. If that were to happen, then she would be kicking herself with remorse. With that in mind, she put on a serious expression as she said, "I have a rough understanding of some concepts related to martial arts because there's a servant in our clan by the name of Zhuhou. Our patriarch could tell that she possessed an aptitude for studying martial arts from a young age, and I'm very close with her. She really likes to keep to herself and doesn't speak to anyone much aside from me, and she's the one who told me everything I know about martial arts. One time, I was following along behind big sister Zhuhou in secret, while she was training by walking over a bunch of wooden poles. The tallest poles are almost as high as the roofs, and it was super fun. However, one time I accidentally slipped and fell. I was fine, but our patriarch still handed down a severe punishment to big sister Zhuhou because of this. After that, big sister Zhuhou never brought me along when she practiced martial arts in the morning and at night, or when she hid in her room to bathe in medicinal concoctions." Chen Ping'an was feeling a little guilty upon hearing this. There was a good chance that the big sister Zhuhou that Li Baoping was referring to was the very same female servant He had struck with a pair of roof tiles on that day, one in the chest and one to the head. At the time, he had snuck into the Li clan's manor and used his slingshot to smash the 2 food containers in the birdcage. The servant protecting that little girl from Sun-Scorched Mountain had discovered him first, and she quickly sprang onto the roof before leaping toward the rooftop that he had been standing on. Even now, as he recollected this sequence of events, he still couldn't help but feel a sense of admiration for her. Even though Qian Pingyan remained reluctant to acknowledge himself as Li Baoping's junior uncle, she was still keen to tell him everything that she knew nonetheless, and she continued, "Let me give you an example. Shi Chuanzhe's family owns a shop, and business has always been booming for the shop, making it a very lucrative source of income. This is why their shop is one of the oldest and most well-established shops in our town. However, if all they do is spend money on making products without bothering to attract customers, then they'll quickly run out of money and be forced to close down the shop. Isn't that right?" For a money-obsessed little miser like Qian Pingyan, this analogy was perfect, and an enlightened look instantly appeared on his face as he said, "So what you're saying is that each person has some savings, and if they can practice fist techniques well, then they'll be able to grow their wealth and vice versa. What if someone doesn't practice martial arts at all? Are they essentially just preserving their savings?" Li Baoping thought about this for a moment, then nodded in response. "That sounds about right. Junior uncle, have you heard of the saying that practicing fist techniques is a surefire way to ruin your life? This is particularly true for the fist techniques that claim to be able to grant the practitioner exceptional power in a short time. Those fist techniques appear to be extremely powerful and badass, but in reality they're extremely damaging to the users. That's because the practitioners of those fist techniques haven't found the key to cultivation at all, so they're training completely incorrectly. Many of them will end up with a multitude of injuries and illnesses at a young age, and it's hard to say whether they'll even be able to live until their old age. Even if they do, they're always in terrible condition. That's because from the very first day they began practicing fist techniques, they've been wasting money without making any earnings, so they're constantly whittling down their savings." In the words of the Li clan's patriarch, Li Baoping was born without a butt, so she was unable to sit and was always darting around. Sure enough, she became more and more excited as she spoke, and she was just about to stand up on the trunk of the old willow tree, but sheepishly refrained from doing so after receiving a stern look from Qian Pingyan, then continued, "Hence, you have to be careful, junior uncle. You have to make sure to find the true key to practicing fist techniques. There are countless types of fist techniques in this world, and one of the most important factors that will decide how far one can go is whether they can find the bonded acupoints of their fist techniques, of which there are at least 2 per fist technique. After you find those acupoints, the next thing to do would be to find the best qi circulation route to nourish as many acupoints along the way as possible, like nourishing the earth with spring rain. Even if the fist technique you're practicing isn't of a very high caliber, as long as you take the right path, it'll still strengthen your body and extend your lifespan. On the contrary, if you go down the wrong path, the more advanced the fist techniques you practice, the more detrimental they'll be to your health." A contemplative look appeared on Qian Pingyan's face. He could feel the existence of the qi within his body. It was like a lost little fire dragon, wandering around aimlessly in a massive furnace. In the past, this fire dragon was like a headless chicken, stumbling around without direction and turning around whenever it hit a wall. At this point, the area in which it was active was becoming larger and larger, but ultimately, it would always return to somewhere near the acupoints in the abdomen, where it would roam around in an indecisive fashion. It was like a child that had gone out to play, and the child wanted to return home after growing tired, but they couldn't find the true entrance back to their home. This extremely profound burst of qi had never caused Qian Pingyan any pain or discomfort. Instead, it gave him a very warm and comfortable sensation, like basking in the warmth of the sun during winter. From a very young age, Qian Pingyan had always been very sensitive to the sensation in his own internal organs, so if something went wrong in his body, he would be able to quickly detect it. Back when Kai Jinjian of Dawn Cloud Mountain told him that he didn't have much longer left to live, perhaps she had thought at the time that Qian Pingyan would have merely taken that as a joke, but in reality, Qian Pingyan immediately knew that she was telling the truth. Seeing as he couldn't sense the burst of qi negatively affecting his body in any way, he allowed it to do as it pleased, and deep down, he was quite curious to see which acupoint it was going to ultimately choose as its home. Li Baoping was swinging her little legs back and forth as she crossed her arms and said, I heard that the key to training martial arts is a concept known as qi dispersion, which is completely different from the qi development and qi refinement pursued by cultivators. In contrast with qi development and qi refinement, which provide you with more benefits the more you practice them, training in martial arts involves finding that initial burst of qi, then breaking through one obstacle after another, eradicating all of the auras originally residing in your acupoints to convert them into that initial burst of qi. At the end of this process, you'll be able to control your qi as an extension of your will, circulating it over hundreds of kilometers in an instant, or even in excess of 1,000 kilometers once you reach the 9th tier. In doing so, you'll be able to instantly tap into all the potential in your body, like a general commanding a vast army at will. The resulting power that you'll be granted will naturally be immense, and it'll be no less impressive than cultivators using their qi to soar through the heavens. Big Sister Zhuhou told me that for master martial artists, they can run over walls and rooftops with ease, and they can even take flight like cultivators. If you can go even further than that and reach an even higher level of mastery of the martial arts, then you'll be able to kill those arrogant cultivators as easily as if you were snapping the necks of helpless chickens. Chen Ping'an smiled as he asked, It would naturally be a good thing if practicing martial arts can make me that powerful, but why is it that the standard for measuring one's power is based on how easily they can kill others? Li Baoping faltered slightly upon hearing this, then shook her head as she replied in a truthful manner, I've never thought about that. This is just what Big Sister Zhuhou told me, and when she was telling me about all of this, I could tell that she really aspired to reach that level, just like how I dreamed of catching a fish every single day. After a moment of contemplation, Li Baoping continued, But now that I think about it, according to what Big Sister Zhuhou told me, it seems like martial artists and cultivators are natural enemies. Cultivators like to look down on martial artists, regarding martial arts training as a lowly pursuit that only those who were lacking in cultivation aptitude would resort to. Hence, they regard martial artists to be inferior to them, denouncing them as lapdogs of the mortal empires. Similarly, martial artists feel like all cultivators are extremely arrogant and conceited. They think it's extremely unfair that martial artists are regarded as heathens and criminals, while cultivators get to lay claim over countless desirable places and blessed lands, even though they only make up a tiny percentage of the overall population. On top of that, they conceitedly refer to themselves as immortals, attaining immortality through the cultivation of mystical abilities, and they think that they deserve to be revered and worshipped by mortals and martial artists. An amused smile appeared on Li Baoping's face as she remarked, But there's no need for you to pay any heed to these conflicts, junior uncle. They're extremely boring and pointless. A hesitant look then appeared on Li Baoping's face, and it seemed that a thought had occurred to her, but she was reluctant to articulate it, as if she were feeling guilty about something. In the end, she really didn't want to deceive Chen Ping'an, so she decided to come clean, and a distraught look appeared on her face as she said, Big Sister Zhuhou and her father, Uncle Zhu He, were supposed to come with us to the southern border, but I was worried that you wouldn't like them, so I lied to them and told them to go and wait for us at the town's eastern gate. If Uncle Zhu He were with us, he would be able to instruct you in your fist technique practice. Big Sister Zhuhou has been practicing martial arts under her father's tutelage from a young age, and our patriarch once told me in private that even though Uncle Zhu He's aptitude for practicing martial arts is rather limited, he's very good at instructing others in martial arts training, so he's definitely worthy of being referred to as a brilliant teacher. Even in the affluent clans in the Greatly Empire's capital city, he would be treated as an esteemed guest, but because of me, we don't have neither Uncle Zhu He nor Big Sister Zhuhou with us. Chen Ping'an hurriedly consoled. It's all right. I may not have a master to instruct me in my fist technique practice, but I have a training guide. At this point, I don't even know all of the characters in the training guide yet, so I definitely can't just keep training blindly. From now on, all I'll do is practice walking meditation and standing meditation. I've already confirmed that those practices are safe and will only nurture my body. If I want to truly make some progress in my fist technique, I'll probably have to learn to be able to read the entire guide by myself first, but I'm not in any hurry. My goal for practicing fist techniques wasn't to become a powerful martial artist to begin with. All I want is to be able to live longer, and I don't have any aspirations beyond that. However, Li Baoping was clearly already fixated on the idea that she had done something wrong, and she was feeling guiltier and guiltier by the second. The corners of her lips began to droop down, and tears were beginning to well up in her eyes again. In martial arts, the master is only responsible for teaching the basics, while the disciples' talent and hard work decide how far they'll go. But even so, the master still plays a very important role. The competence of the master will determine how high the disciple's starting point is. On top of that, some masters are limited in their abilities, so they have no choice but to let a disciple go off on their own at a certain point, but more competent masters are able to guide their disciples further before letting go. Hence, to find a good master, you have to make sure that they're a competent master, not just someone with a big reputation. Li Baoping was sniffling pitifully, and the tears were about to overflow from her eyes as she continued, "Junior uncle, you're a generational martial arts prodigy. What am I going to do if the lie I told hinders you from becoming a master martial artist?" Chen Ping'an had no idea how she had arrived at the absurd conclusion that he was a martial arts prodigy, but he didn't have any time to dwell on that thought. His top priority right now was to stop her from crying. Whenever Li Baoping fell into a rut, she gave one the feeling that she was truly heartbroken, and it was nothing like the superficial distress that the average child displayed in order to attract attention. All of a sudden, Chen Ping'an was struck by a burst of inspiration, and he raised his hand, placing his palm in front of Li Baoping's face before gently closing it into a fist as he loudly declared, "That's enough." Li Baoping was immediately rooted to the spot by this sudden gesture, and as a result, the flow of her tears was also abruptly arrested. "What are you doing, junior uncle?" Chen Ping'an waved his fist as he erupted into triumphant laughter. "What do you think of your junior uncle now? That was really impressive, right? I got you to stop crying right away." Chen Ping'an was pulling out all the stops in order to console Li Baoping, and this was the first time that he had officially acknowledged himself to be her junior uncle. A smile immediately broke through Li Baoping's tears, not because she wasn't distraught anymore, but instead because her elation outweighed her distress in this moment. Chen Ping'an was very relieved to see this, and he set his palms down onto the trunk of the old willow tree, then raised himself up to sit down beside Li Baoping, while the pair of baskets, one large and one small, were placed beneath their feet. Li Baoping said in a quiet voice, "Uncle Zhu, he often told big sister Zhu Lu that training fist techniques the incorrect way is a surefire way to ruin one's body, but someone who finds the true essence of their fist techniques will be able to slay gods with a single punch. If a martial artist falls ill, it's far more difficult to treat them than it is for a normal person." There were 2 times that big sister Zhu Lu was almost unable to pull through. After the first time, she was unable to recover for close to half a year. During that time, she was constantly sick and frail, and she was so weak that she couldn't even lift up a water bucket. The second time was even worse. After I heard the commotion, I got onto a stool, then poked through the window paper, and I saw big sister Zhu Lu in so much pain that she was rolling around on her bed. The other people with her weren't even able to hold her down, and in the end, even her fingernails had all peeled away. There was blood everywhere, and I felt really bad for her. After that, we asked the shopkeeper of the Yang family's medicine shop to bring us some medicine, and only after taking the medicine did her pain seem to go away. At the time, our patriarch was standing at the entrance of the courtyard, but he didn't go in. Instead, he shook his head and left, and it seemed like he was quite disappointed about something. I asked him why he looked so disappointed at the time, and he told me that the medicine had saved her life, but it had rid her of any hope of progressing to the 8th tier. Hence, there was no longer any need to invest too much in her development, as doing so would only be of detriment to her. If she's immensely blessed by the heavens, then she'll be able to reach the 7th tier, but if she's unlucky, then she may not even reach the 6th tier. Li Baoping turned to Chen Ping'an with a concerned expression as she continued, "Please don't get sick, junior uncle. I don't know anything, so if you get sick, I won't be able to help you at all." Chen Ping'an smiled as he reassured, "Don't worry, I won't, and even if I do, there's no need for you to worry. I don't mean to boast, but I have a very high pain tolerance." Li Baoping was rather skeptical about this claim, and she reached out to pinch his arm before giving it a gentle twist. "Does that hurt?" Chen Ping'an patted her on the head, then turned to the path that they had taken to get here as he asked, "Have I told you about the most painful experience of my life so far?" Li Baoping shook her head in response. Chen Ping'an pressed his palms down onto the tree trunk, then crossed his ankles as he swayed back and forth in a carefree fashion, just as Li Baoping was doing. A faint smile then appeared on his face as he said, "It was the second time I went into the mountains to gather medicinal ingredients on my own. At the time I was only 4 years old, and as I was leaving the house, I thought to myself that I was going to gather a ton of medicinal ingredients, so I picked the largest basket to take with me. Before I even made it out of the town, I was already exhausted. It was a really bright and sunny day, and my shoulders felt as if they were on fire from being chafed by the rope attached to the basket, and the pain was even worse in my back. At that time, the pain was actually still bearable, and I wasn't particularly afraid. However, I was feeling really disheartened because the mountain looked so far away, as if I would never be able to reach it, even if I walked my entire life. On top of that, this wasn't very long after the first time I entered the mountains, so the blisters on the underside of my feet quickly began to act up. I was gritting my teeth and crying as I walked along. With each step that I took, I was telling myself that I still hadn't reached the foot of the mountain yet, so I could still just turn back and go home. I'm too young, my basket's too big, and the mountain's too far away, so it wouldn't have been embarrassing for me to turn back, and my mother definitely wouldn't have blamed me for it. Li Baoping quickly became immersed in his story, and she quietly asked, "Did you give up in the end?" Chen Ping'an shook his head in response. "I didn't. At the time, I suddenly decided that no matter what, I was going to make it to the foot of the mountain, and after that I would turn back. In the end, I really did make it to the foot of the mountain, and while I was sitting on the ground and crying, I thought to myself that I had already made it to the mountain, so I may as well pick a medicinal herb before I go home. After that, I began to climb the mountain, and when I spotted the medicinal herbs, I was suddenly instilled with a burst of energy. It was a very strange thing. An admiring look appeared on Li Baoping's face upon hearing this, and she praised, "You must have filled your entire basket with medicinal herbs before you went home, right?" There was a hint of pride in Li Baoping's eyes as she spoke, as if she were feeling proud on Chen Ping'an's behalf. Chen Ping'an shook his head in response. "No. I was up there until the sun was about to go down, but by the time I left the mountain, the medicinal herbs I'd collected still hadn't even covered the entire bottom of the basket. Medicinal herbs aren't that easy to find, and given how small I was at the time, it was actually more of a chore for me to carry around that big basket while traversing the mountain paths than it was to pick medicine. On top of that, I really was exhausted. I thought to myself that if I didn't leave at that time, then I would be stuck on the mountain at night on my own, so I was really scared. However, what I was most scared of was..." Chen Ping'an's voice trailed off here, and Li Baoping waited for a long time for him to continue, but he remained silent. A curious look appeared on her face as she asked, "What were you most afraid of, junior uncle?" "Nothing," Chen Ping'an replied with a shake of his head. "At the very least, I was no longer scared of it by the end." Li Baoping was very considerate of Chen Ping'an's feelings, and didn't insist that he tell her what he was so afraid of. After returning to his senses, Chen Ping'an turned to Li Baoping and smiled as he said, "I'm not telling you all of this to boast about how tough and resilient I am. All of the impoverished children in the town have had similar experiences, so I'm not special in any way. I'm only telling you this because I think you did a very good job explaining the intricacies of martial arts practice to me. It reminds me a lot of back when I would sneak to the school to watch Mr. Chi's lessons in secret. Didn't you say that there are no female teachers and scholars? I feel like after you get to Mountain Cliff Academy and read enough books, there's a chance that you could become the first female teacher." After hearing what Chen Ping'an had to say, Li Baoping was immediately instilled with a sense of vigor and ambition, and she raised her fists as she encouraged, "You can do it, Li Baoping. I believe in you." Chen Ping'an watched her self-encouragement in silence, and he knew that if Mr. Chi were still around to see this, he would also be very happy. However, what she said next immediately left him feeling both amused and exasperated. "I'll definitely be able to do this because I have the best junior uncle in the world." Chen Ping'an could only pretend to have not heard anything. In this picturesque season when flora and fauna were flourishing and thriving, the two of them sat next to one another, and both of them had beautiful aspirations for the future. And a secretive location on the other side of the creek, a man and a young girl were seated with their legs crossed while eating some dry rations. There was a sharp gleam in the girl's eyes as she grumbled, "Father, will the young mistress really be able to make it safely to the border of our greatly empire with that idiot accompanying her?" I heard that battles regularly break out on the border, and there are lots of former soldiers turned bandits causing unrest in the area as well. Have you forgotten the lesson that he taught you? The man jibed. That was your first ever battle as a martial artist, and not only did you lose, you lost in such embarrassing fashion as well. The girl was furious to hear this and she objected. That's because you forbade me from activating my aura for fear that I wouldn't be able to bear the repercussions. Right now, I can beat him to a pulp even with one hand tied behind my back. Are you sure? The man asked with a smile. Of course I am. Don't forget that I'm at the pinnacle of the second tier right now, the girl reminded in an indignant voice. The man took a sip of water from a canteen, then shook his head in response. You won't be able to beat him. Only in a sparring match where things aren't taken too far will you have any chance of winning. The girl was clearly unconvinced. In her eyes, Chen Ping'an had only just embarked on the path of martial arts training, and he had only gotten the better of her during their rooftop battle back in the Li clan's manor because he had taken advantage of the terrain. An amused look appeared on the man's face as he jibed. What an ungrateful little rascal you are. Back when he sent you falling down from the roof during your battle, he made sure to grab onto you to soften your fall. If I had been in his place, I would have thrown an extra tile onto your head to make sure you wouldn't be getting in my way anytime soon. That's why I called him an idiot, the girl sneered. He's training to become a martial artist, yet his heart is as soft as a woman's. There's no way he'll live very long like this. The man was quite taken aback to hear this and scoffed. You're not a very capable martial artist, but you sure seem to know a lot for a little girl your age. Who taught you all of this? I never said anything like this to you. The girl raised her chin in a proud manner as she replied. The second young master taught me all of this. He's read a ton of books, but he never goes around preaching about morals and ethics. All he says is that someone soft of heart can't lead an army effectively, and that one must be decisive and heartless in battle. The man's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this, and he was just about to set his foolish daughter straight when he abruptly rose to his feet and instructed in an urgent voice. We have to cross the creek. The girl rose to her feet with a puzzled expression. Why? Didn't you say we should follow the young mistress in secret? Instead of answering her question, the man urged. Someone's coming. Make sure to be on your guard. With that, the two of them quickly rushed over the creek. Chen Ping'an and Li Baoping had only just left the old willow tree, and were about to continue in their journey when they spotted a figure in the distance. Chen Ping'an set down the basket on his back, then instructed Li Baoping to stand behind him. If they were situated east of the town, then Chen Ping'an wouldn't have been surprised to encounter anyone there, even if they were an immortal or a demon. However, this path that was leading to the south was about to end soon, so it was very peculiar to run into someone here. In the distance, a man who wasn't particularly tall or well-built was making his way directly toward Chen Ping'an and Li Baoping. He was dragging along a white donkey behind him, and there was a conical bamboo hat on his head. A cloth pouch was slung diagonally across his shoulder, while strips of cloth were tied around his legs. He was holding a bamboo staff in one hand, and strapped to his waist was a saber in a green bamboo scabbard. The man stopped around 5 or 6 steps away from Chen Ping'an and Li Baoping, and he refrained from advancing any further beyond that point. He removed the conical bamboo hat to reveal a rather unremarkable face, and he smiled as he asked, You must be Chen Ping'an, right? My name is Aoyang Liang as in kindness. He then added, I am a swordsman. The short yet voluptuous woman pulled out a string of brand new, intricately crafted keys, using one of which she opened the yard gate, and as she made her way inside, she smiled as she mused, Finally, there's an opportunity for me to put my skills to good use. The woman took a glance at the birdcage sitting at the foot of the wall, and much to her surprise, the sound of flapping wings rang out from within. They still haven't starved to death? However, she then quickly realized what had to have happened for the chicken to survive to this point, and she mused, You have to thank me for finding such a good neighbor for you. Harmonious neighbors ensure joy for everyone. After that, she turned her gaze to the neighboring yard, but due to her short stature, she was unable to see to the other side. Hence, she had no choice but to make her way over to the earthen wall, where she got up on the tips of her toes to see what was on the other side. However, she was only greeted by the sight of an empty yard, which was a rather boring sight, so she quickly withdrew her gaze. She made her way toward the door of the main room, then pulled out another key to open the door before making her way inside. She reached out a finger before stroking it over the table, only to find that it was completely devoid of dust. A hint of displeasure appeared on her face upon seeing this. It was like someone applying makeup to her daughter's face without her permission. Sure, the daughter could look better for it, but as a parent, she was naturally not going to be happy. Out of the 3 servants who had accompanied the woman to Clay Vase Alley, the imposing man stayed on Clay Vase Alley outside the yard and closed his eyes to rest. Meanwhile, the old man strode into the yard, while the woman carrying the sword made her way into the main room as well. The woman made her way into Song Jisun's bedroom alone before inspecting her surroundings. The room was furnished with a bed and a desk, and there were some valuable antiques and trinkets sitting on the desk. Song Jisun had most likely left these things behind, as he didn't want to bring them with him. The woman strode over to the desk to find that there was a stack of 3 books sitting in the middle of the desk, and she gave them a brief inspection to find that there was nothing remarkable about them, and they were merely the 3 elementary books normally assigned to school children, namely Principles of Life for Children, Rights and Music, and an anthology of literary essays. These books were used by children of privileged and underprivileged upbringings alike in the Great Li Empire. The woman discovered that the books were quite old, but they were completely clean and spotless, and the image of a certain figure sprang into mind upon making this observation. She shook her head, then casually asked, "Donghua, how much does this Principles of Life for Children cost in the capital city?" The woman holding the sword had her back facing the bedroom, and she replied in a respectful voice, "Somewhere between 40 to 60 copper coins, Your Majesty." The woman nodded in response as she mused. It looks like the loftier the principles preached by these wise men of Confucianism, the less valuable they are. The woman stacked the 3 books back down on their original spot on the desk, then gently rested her hand on an anthology of literary essays, which was sitting on the top of the pile. A hint of mockery appeared on her face as she sneered. If it wasn't for those fictionists doing everything in their power to promote these books wherever they could over the past centuries and millennia, even stooping as low as to become petty officials tasked with creating unofficial historic chronicles, there's no way that Confucianism would have been able to reach its current heights. The old man in the yard gently cleared his throat, then cautioned, "Your Majesty, this is not a place where you can speak your mind as you please, so do be careful." The woman smiled as she replied, "Don't worry so much. Following his death, Qi Jingchun made an agreement with those people up above, so this place will no longer be under any scrutiny. Do you really think an insignificant place like Jewel's small world would be worthy of any attention from those mighty figures now that Qi Jingchun is no longer here? Even so, it would still be in our best interest to exercise caution, Your Majesty," the old man insisted. A faint smile appeared on the woman's face as she said in a gentle voice, "Fine, fine, I'll hold my tongue for now then. Su Hunran, when it comes to observing others, you really need to learn from Liang Song. Even though he's your disciple in the imperial court, he truly has emerged to excel above you, and that's a fact. I know my uncle was intentionally taking jabs at you by proclaiming that your disciple has surpassed you, but don't pay him any heed, that's just how he is. He thinks he's well educated after reading a few books, and he goes around dropping quotes without considering if they're appropriate or not." The old man by the name of Su Hunran was rather exasperated to hear this, and he didn't know if the woman was actually trying to console him. All of a sudden, the thought of their brief encounter with Song Chongjing during their journey to the south sprang into Su Hunran's mind, and a grim look immediately appeared on his face. At the time, Song Chongjing had appeared quite exhausted, looking as if he were still yet to recover from major injuries that he had sustained during a grueling battle, but the fact that he had dared to voluntarily show himself to Su Hunran by lifting the curtain of his carriage indicated that there was a very good chance that he had progressed further on the path of martial arts. It was extremely unlikely that he had already reached the 10th tier, but after reaching the pinnacle of the 9th tier, each tiny step that he advanced from there could be equivalent to a disparity of an entire tier for martial artists at the 7th and 8th tiers. Su Hunran was vastly renowned across the Great Li Empire's imperial court as the empire's #1 swordmaster. The fact that he was referred to as a swordmaster rather than a swordsman didn't seem to hold very significant meaning, but in reality there was a massive disparity between the 2 titles. The prodigious swordsman who had perished at Song Chongjing's hands, Liang Song, was Su Hunran's most prized disciple. Su Hunran saw Liang Song as a son, so there was naturally a major vendetta between the two. Su Hunran liked to nurture his sword within his sleeve, and the sword's name was White Bird. It was only just over an inch in length, but it possessed immense destructive capabilities, and it was said that the sword could fly over a distance close to 100 kilometers in the blink of an eye. Even after the sword had already flown back up Su Hunran's sleeve, the target still wouldn't be dead yet, and that was quite a harrowing concept to consider. The woman sat down onto the bed, then rested a palm down on it as she remarked, "It's not exactly the most privileged lifestyle, but it does grant a great deal of freedom." Donghua said in a gentle voice, "Your efforts in ensuring a good upbringing for His Highness have not gone to waste, Your Majesty. Through these hardships he's sure to have developed a strong character." The woman smiled as she rose to his feet and replied, "That's a rather pretentious way of putting things. If we want to talk about hardships, then that orphan from next door has experienced far more than Muir, too." She strode over to a wall, and after a moment of contemplation she murmured to herself, "The mystical abilities recorded on those pages of that ancient book given to us by the Liu clan on Fortune Street are too old, so it's impossible to verify their authenticity, and they're very different from what's being advocated by the top Taoist sects that specialize in talisman creation. I recall that an interesting little mystical ability was recorded on one of the pages. What was the incantation for that again? Ah, I remember it now, let me see." The woman had her back to Donghua outside the room as she instructed, "Go and wait for me to open the gate of the neighboring yard." She then began to chant an incantation. "Heaven and earth are connected, and the faces of mountains are conjoined. Soft as an apricot blossom, thin as a sheet of paper, this finger of mine is a sword that opens all doors. In the name of the master of 3 mountains and 9 lords." The woman was chanting the incantation, despite the fact that she wasn't holding the all-important talisman, and she extended a finger forward before casually strolling right through the wall, leaving a series of slight ripples behind her. The woman made her way into Chen Ping'an's bare and dilapidated house, and she mused, "Some people are blessed with good fortune and remain in the good graces of the gods no matter how much they squander those blessings, while others were born to lead lives of hardship. It's not your fault for choosing the wrong parents, but who can you complain to? Even if they find those responsible for your ill fortune, would you dare to say anything? Before you find out the truth and come after me for vengeance, I suggest you stay far away from Dawn Cloud Mountain, Sunscorch Mountain and Lake Shujian. Who knows how long it'll be before you find me, and you'll only have a chance if you manage to leave the Great Li Empire alive." She then turned to the wall as she murmured to herself, "Who is this master of 3 mountains and 9 lords? No such person exists on our eastern treasured vile continent. Could it be an ancient immortal who lost their lineage and invulnerable body? If that's the case, then why is it that this little spell technique still works?" She was unable to think of an answer, so she decided that she was going to conduct further research after returning to the capital, or she could also seek out Chui Chan and ask him. In any case, he was nearby, so she may as well ask him. She made her way to the yard gate, but even after pulling the deadbolt across, the gate still refused to budge. Only then did she realize that the gate had to have been locked from the outside, so she exerted a bit more power and tugged on the gate to break the copper lock by force. After opening the gate, she discovered Su Hunran and Donghua standing outside. "How could you just break in by force like this? This is completely unacceptable. Make sure to find someone later to repair the gate, and make sure to replace the lock with an identical one as well," she scolded. Su Hunran and Donghua were clearly already accustomed to this, but the burly man standing on Clay Vase Alley couldn't help but furrow his brows slightly. Upon emerging from the yard, the woman suddenly stopped in her tracks, then instructed, "Donghua, take 63 steps to your right, and make sure that your stride length matches that of Muir's back when he was 7 years old." Donghua did as she was instructed, taking 63 steps to the right before stopping. The woman behind her turned to face the wall and she concluded, "This must be the spot." This particular patch of the wall didn't appear to be remarkable in any way, but the woman was glowering at it with a resentful expression as she spat through gritted teeth. "Song Yuzhong deserves to die 1,000 deaths." She then quickly reverted back to her usual regal and elegant expression as she said, "I've told you about what happened back then. Where do you think the crux of the problem lies? And what do you think I can do for Muir?" Donghua shook her head in response. I don't know, and I wouldn't dare to comment carelessly on something so important. The woman heaved a slightly dejected sigh. There are two events that are constantly weighing on Moore's heart, the first of which was naturally that time when that piece of lowly scum chased him all the way here from outside the alley during that heavy storm, then grabbed him by the throat and pinned him against the wall. Given his personality, he definitely wouldn't have been able to stomach something like this. At the time, Moore was still just a small boy, so aside from being humiliated, I'm sure he would have been terrified of the killing intent being displayed by that boy as well. A cold gleam suddenly appeared in the woman's eyes as she extended a hand forward, then gently pressed it against the rough and uneven earthen wall. The second thing that's weighing on his heart is quite interesting. In fact, it was most likely that event that introduced to Moore what guilt felt like for the first time in his life. That's why during that meeting between him and Fu Nanhua of Old Dragon City, he couldn't decide on who he wanted Fu Nanhua to kill for him, ultimately switching his target from Lu Xianying to that boy. Donghua was rather curious about the backstory behind all of this, but she knew that serving a powerful mistress was no different from serving a tigress, so she had to be careful and know when it wasn't right to ask questions. The woman withdrew her palm, then wiped it on Donghua's sleeve before turning to make her way toward the entrance of the alley. All of a sudden, a displeased look appeared on her face, and even though she was well past the age when little girls were considered to be adorable while throwing tantrums, there was still a unique sense of allure about her as she grumbled. All Moore said was that Chan Ping'an cursed his parents to die because he was born on the 5th day of the 5th month, and that because he was living in the ancestral residence, his parents couldn't enter the cycle of reincarnation, so he should move out. For their sake. The more she talked about it, the more infuriated she became. All he did was make a joke. What's the big deal? It's not Moore's fault that Chan Ping'an was stupid enough to believe the joke and broke some stupid vow about not going to the dragon kills to become a potter. Besides, a vow from a worthless piece of scum is just as worthless. In contrast, Moore is more precious than anything in this world. He was like a pristine and spotless piece of jade. Yet he's been tarnished because of this nonsense. Even if he can go on to become a cultivator of the upper 5 tiers, just the slightest flaw in his mental state would prevent him from attaining a true untainted physique. How could a worthless brat possibly compensate for that? What a worthless piece of filth. Donghua's expression remained completely unchanged upon hearing this, as was the case for Su Hunran, and it seemed that neither of them were paying any heed to what was being said. However, the brows of the burly man trailing along behind them furrowed once again. Right as the woman was about to emerge from Clayvase Alley, she abruptly turned around, and almost at the exact same moment, Donghua and Su Hunran parted down the middle, one to the left and one to the right, so that they wouldn't obstruct the woman's view. There was a smile on the woman's face that was both pure and seductive, presenting a sense of conflicted allure, and she asked in a gentle voice, "Do you think there's something wrong with what I said, Wang Yifu?" "I don't know much about this situation, but from what I've heard, I do indeed think you're wrong," Wang Yifu replied in a solemn voice. The woman wasn't surprised at all to hear this. Instead, she burst into laughter as she praised. As expected of the Lu Empire's fiercest general, Su Hunran had a habit of looking at things through narrowed eyes, and at this point, his eyes had narrowed into slits, while his sword chi was ravaging the narrow alley, causing flakes of clay to clatter down incessantly from the nearby earthen walls. Meanwhile, Donghua took a step back, as if to give Su Hunran more space to do battle in. And a mocking sneer appeared on her face as she cast her gaze toward Wang Yifu. "A homeless dog like you should learn that you can't just bark as you please." Wang Yifu was once one of the Lu Empire's most powerful generals. His ancestors had all been generals as well, and prior to his surrender, he was equivalent in status to the Pillar General of the Great Li Empire. Song Chongjing was known as a godlike figure in the Great Li Empire's military, and a very long time ago, he had picked out Wang Yifu in particular and challenged him to a battle. Wang Yifu wasn't a particularly outstanding leader on the battlefield, but he possessed exceptional combat prowess. Even though he was a cultivator, his physique was as powerful as that of an 8th-tier martial artist, and he was also extremely skilled with the saber. Furthermore, he was able to summon a powerful Yin god to assist him in battle, and he was one of a handful of the most formidable figures in the Lu Empire. The woman extended a petite hand that was as fair and delicate as mutton fat jade, then waved it as she said, There's no need to get so worked up, Su Hun ran. General Wang is a reasonable person, he just has too strong a sense of justice. We're all in the same camp at the moment, so don't just turn to violence at the first sign of a disagreement. I really don't like that. Su Hun ran silently withdrew the vast sword qi emanating from one of his sleeves. Meanwhile, the woman continued. Wang Yifu, I hear that there's someone that you've sworn to protect, even at the cost of your own life and honor. How about instead of sending that person to the place we agreed upon, I send them to the Imperial Palace or the brothel division instead? Wang Yifu's hands immediately balled up into tight fists upon hearing this, and veins began to bulge on his forehead, while his eyes turned completely bloodshot. The woman continued in a casual voice. All I promised was that I would keep them alive. Don't take my kindness for granted, Wang Yifu. All of a sudden, Wang Yifu smiled and said, Forgive me, Your Majesty. I am the one at fault here. The woman smiled as she said, I'm glad you've realized your mistakes. There's no need for you to follow us any further after we leave Clay Vase Alley. Go and collect the former kiln supervision official's head. Then put it in a wooden box and bring it to me. I may have a use for it in the future. Wang Yifu was very much taken aback to hear this. Song Yuzhong was designated by His Majesty to come here, and he has backers in both the Ministry of Rites and the Ministry of Astronomy. That's something that you said yourself. Why do you want to have him killed? The woman smiled as she countered. Do I need a reason to have someone killed? Don't forget who I am. Wang Yifu heaved a faint sigh, then cupped his fist in a salute as he lowered his head. I'll be sure to carry out your orders, Your Majesty. With that, the four of them emerged from Clay Vase Alley, following which Wang Yifu parted ways with the others. After Wang Yifu had completely disappeared from view, Su Hun ran jeered. The fierce and righteous Wang Yifu doesn't even have a spine anymore. Instead of making her way toward the busy streets, the woman went down a more quiet alley as she said in a self-deprecating voice, Does he really think I don't know the difference between right and wrong? Su Hun ran didn't know how to respond to this, so he ultimately decided to remain silent and not say anything. The woman raised her head to look up at the sky as she mused. Only now, when I'm in the same position that he's in, do I come to realize that Qi Jingchun was truly an extremely impressive man. Our Greatly Empire owes him a great debt. It's very regrettable that our Greatly Empire couldn't make use of such an extraordinary man. No wonder His Majesty has been in such a dejected mood lately, and it's an even greater pity that Qi Jingchun ultimately still died, despite his incredible powers. All of these sentiments were coming straight from the woman's heart. After she finally fell silent, a thought suddenly occurred to Su Hun ran, and he swept a sleeve through the air to fill the surrounding area with his sword qi, then asked, Your Majesty, that boy may have recently stumbled upon extravagant wealth, but even so, he's still just an ordinary young boy. Isn't it overkill to be sending such powerful assassins after him? It seemed that the woman couldn't even be bothered to answer this type of question, and she casually instructed, Donghua, you tell him. Donghua replied in a cold voice, Even a lion must go all out when hunting a rabbit. Su Hunran had no response to this. A faint smile appeared on the woman's face as she said, My uncle may be a martial artist, but there's one thing that he said that's extremely wise. In the face of any enemy, the first thing that you have to ensure is that you don't gift them your head. In contrast with his colleagues from the Ministry of Rites, who were staying on Peach Leaf Alley, Song Yuzhong was living alone on Dragon Riding Alley in a residence that had recently been vacated by its previous owner. The door of the room was open, and he was seated beside the table with only a wine flagon, a plate of salt-brined peanuts, and a large bowl of baijiu in front of him. Having served as the former kiln supervision official in the town for 15 years, everything that he consumed here struck him with a sense of immense nostalgia. He had only just raised his bowl when he noticed the burly man that had appeared in his yard without any warning, and he smiled as he remarked, You're finally here. He then raised his bowl up high as he asked, Can you wait for me to finish my drink first? Wang Yifu hesitated momentarily, then nodded in response. It seemed that Song Yuzhong didn't want to keep Wang Yifu waiting, and he downed close to half of the bowl's contents in one go. His cheeks became flushed from the alcohol and he said, Can you pass on a message to Song Jisun for me? Actually, from now on, he's most likely going to be referred to as Song Mu. A pleading look appeared in Song Yuzhong's eyes as he asked, Can you tell him that in all these years I've always really wanted a pair of couplets from him? Wang Yifu shook his head resolutely in response. I'm afraid I can't do that. Song Yuzhong took a deep breath, then closed his eyes as a look of relief appeared on his face, and he mused in a quiet voice. In my youth, I liked to read chronicles detailing other people's travels. I read that old dragon city at the southernmost part of eastern treasured Vile continent often had large waves crashing onto its shores, presenting a spectacular sight to behold. Let this bowl of wine be the crashing waves of the South Sea. Wang Yifu lunged forward, then promptly snapped Song Yuzhong's neck. Wang Yifu didn't feel any joy from killing Song Yuzhong, and he gently lowered the former kiln supervision official onto the table, making it appear as if he had passed out drunk. Wang Yifu poured a bowl of wine for himself and drank it in silence as he thought about his own situation. In the end, he remarked to the already deceased Song Yuzhong, "It seems that not all scholars are so insufferable." Chen Ping'an was still rather suspicious of Aoyang, but he had to admit that Aoyang was a very interesting person. He had a donkey that he never rode, he was constantly bickering with Li Huai, and he was determined to swindle Lin Shuyi into drinking alcohol, telling him that fine wine and beautiful women were the best things that this world had to offer. He would also always walk circles around Chen Ping'an during the latter's walking meditation sessions, telling him that if he could reach full mastery of this fist technique, then he was going to be an extremely formidable martial artist, able to pummel anyone that he pleased. However, he then told Chen Ping'an that violence was never the answer, and that if Chen Ping'an wanted to make it far in life, then he would have to replicate Aoyang by using his looks and his charisma to make others bend to his will. In addition to that, he would also boast to Zhu He about how his swordsmanship was unmatched, and that whenever he drew his sword, even he was terrified of himself, let alone his opponents. Zhu He merely smiled and nodded in response, but Zhu Lu refused to believe him, insisting that he showed them his abilities with that bamboo saber of his. She didn't ask him to demonstrate any devastating sword techniques. All she asked was that he cut down a tree with around the same diameter as the average bowl, and she would concede that she had been wrong about him. In response, Aoyang told her that this was not a good day for him to show off his sword techniques, and that even though he was already such a master swordsman that he could use anything as a sword, he had to be in the right mood to display his sword techniques. After all, was a powerful swordsman really a powerful swordsman if they didn't have some strange idiosyncrasies? Apparently, he was only interested in showing off his sword techniques on days with strong wind, heavy snowfall, or pelting rain. For example, during heavy rain, he would be able to demonstrate how his sword was so fast that it could slice through the air without catching a single drop of rain. Zhu Lu spat on the ground in disgust, then turned to run away, and Aoyang wasn't bothered by this in the slightest. Instead, he merely turned to Zhu He and remarked that his daughter had a rather foul personality. He also promised Zhu He that if no one wanted to marry Zhu Lu because of her terrible temper, then he would be willing to grant Zhu He the enormous honor of becoming his father-in-law. From that time onward, Zhu He no longer tried to engage in conversation with Aoyang, leaving him to drink alone in a slightly dejected fashion. It just so happened that a few days later, as they were approaching the Iron Talisman River, light rain began to fall from the sky. It wasn't a heavy storm by any stretch of the imagination, but there was definitely rain nonetheless. Aoyang was focused on walking along while dragging his donkey behind him when all of a sudden, Zhu Lu stopped him in his tracks. A perplexed look appeared on his face, following which he quickly realized what she wanted and he said, "Oh, you want me to show you my sword techniques now that it's raining, right? Don't worry, I haven't forgotten. Can you not look at me like you're looking at a fraud? You're still too young. You don't understand how many rules almighty swordsmen like myself are bound by. The rain isn't heavy enough, so even if I were to use a blade of grass as a sword, I would feel like I'm not doing the blade of grass justice. Wait, what I meant to say is that I wouldn't be doing my exceptional sword techniques justice. Hence, we have to wait for a day with heavy rainfall before I show you what I'm capable of. When the time comes, I guarantee you that I'll be able to sever the Iron Talisman River, and I may not accept you as my disciple even if you cry and beg me." Zhu He quickly stepped in and dragged his daughter away in silence. The rain was far from heavy, so they were able to travel as normal without delay. Aoyang adjusted his conical bamboo hat as he shook his head and heaved a faint sigh. Walking at the forefront of the group with his white donkey behind him, he cast a rather lonesome and forlorn figure. To his dismay, 2 days later, a heavy storm arrived, as if the heavens were answering Zhu Lu's prayers. A disgruntled look appeared on Aoyang's face as he yelled, "What the hell are you all looking at? Are there flowers growing on my face? Hurry up and take shelter from the rain. What if our precious little Baoping gets sick from the cold? Can't you have some sympathy? You can watch my sword techniques at any time. Can't you see Baoping is about to freeze to death?" In the end, everyone gathered under a large tree to take shelter from the rain, and they were all staring expectantly at Aoyang. Li Huai wore a fake smile as he imitated his mother's tone and said, "It's a good thing for you that this isn't a thunderstorm. Otherwise, you'll be the first one to be struck down by lightning." Zhu Lu merely looked on with a cold sneer, and even the normally aloof and disinterested Lin Shuyi couldn't help but roll his eyes in disdain. At this point, Zhu He was already completely unwilling to engage in conversation with Aoyang, and he was sitting under the tree while chewing on some dry rations. He had subtly probed Aoyang on many occasions during their journey up to this point, and he had come to the conclusion that even if Aoyang really were a powerful military and cultivator, there was definitely no way that he was the master swordsman that he claimed to be. If he were telling the truth, then Zhu He would be more than happy to accept him as his son-in-law. In fact, he would even be willing to refer to Aoyang as his father-in-law. Compared with when they had first left the blacksmith shop, Li Baoping had become a lot quieter, choosing to remain by Chan Ping'an's side in silence most of the time, and she refused to even let Zhu He or Zhu Lu carry her basket for her. As for Chan Ping'an, he was practicing his meditation as usual, and this had become a sight that everyone was already accustomed to. Aoyang was beginning to feel rather uncomfortable under the scrutiny of Li Huai and the others, and he turned so that his back was facing them, then began taking swigs of wine from his silver gourd. As the rain began to subside, Aoyang suddenly rose to his feet and declared that he was going out to find a suitable branch, and that he was finally going to show everyone his exceptional swordsmanship. However, right as everyone was looking at one another in shock, Aoyang added that if he couldn't find a suitable branch, then there would be nothing he could do. Apparently, for a sword immortal, finding a suitable weapon was just as difficult as it was for the average man to find a wife. Everyone merely looked at him, and no one was even willing to say anything. Aoyang made his way up the mountain shop alone, and the ground was slippery from the rain, causing him to almost slip over. He hurriedly pretended to throw out a few fist techniques to conceal the fact that he had slipped, as if he were warming up for the display of master swordsmanship he had promised everyone. Right after Aoyang disappeared from view, the rain abruptly became heavier without any warning, catching everyone completely off guard. Chan Ping'an opened his eyes and spotted the nearby donkey under the tree. After a moment of contemplation, he stood up and said, "I'll go look for Aoyang." Zhu He also rose to his feet and offered, "I'll go with you. This type of weather is quite dangerous to travel alone in." Chan Ping'an shook his head in response. "There's no need for that. I've encountered this type of weather on many occasions back when I entered the mountains to burn charcoal or collect medicinal ingredients, so there's no need to worry about me. Besides, you need to stay behind and look after everyone else." Zhu He considered the situation for a moment, then nodded in agreement. "All right, then be careful on your own." Chan Ping'an patted Li Baoping on the head, then promised in a gentle voice, "I'll be back before you know it." Wu Yuan was so busy that he barely had a moment to rest throughout the day. Not only did he have to personally oversee the construction of the county office on the eastern side of the town, there was also the matter of choosing sites for the Wenchang Pavilion and Martial Sage Temple. Out of the 4 surnames and 10 clans, aside from the 6 that had already collectively moved out of the town, there were 8 left. During the archway plaque rubbing incident, Right-Hand Minister Donghua of the Ministry of Rights had completely superseded Wu Yuan's authority, and as a result, none of the remaining affluent clans in the town on Fortune Street and Peach Leaf Alley were taking him seriously. Even so, he still had to visit those households one by one, and by the end, his lips were dry and cracked, and he felt as if his throat were on fire. As soon as he returned to the kiln supervision office, he immediately collapsed onto his chair, then loosened his collar as he stared blankly at the decorative engravings on the ceiling with a contemplative expression. His scholarly secretary was standing beside him, and he had accompanied Wu Yuan during his visits to all of the clan leaders. They were never denied an audience, but the clan leaders were far from cooperative, constantly kicking the ball back and forth between one another. One of them would say that the leader of the Lu clan would have to be consulted on the matter of whether the Wenchang pavilion could be constructed on the mountain of porcelain, while another would proclaim that the Wei clan owned the majority of the immortal tomb, so the matter could only be discussed if the leader of the Wei clan agreed to proceed. However, the leaders of the Lu clan and the Wei clan then declared that this was an extremely important matter that concerned the very foundations of their clans, so everyone had to be gathered for a thorough discussion. Otherwise, they were going to be criticized by the other residents of the town. The scholarly secretary was also infuriated by this type of treatment, but he had plenty of experience with things like this from a young age, so he was more than familiar with the rules of the game. He knew that serving as an official was very difficult, and it was even more difficult to serve as the leading official of an area. Hence, he didn't allow his temper to get the better of him. Right at this moment, several of his colleagues approached to inquire about the situation, and he gave them a gentle shake of his head, indicating for them to stay away for now and give Wu Yuan some peace and quiet. All of a sudden, Wu Yuan smiled as he said, "Don't worry about me, I'm fine. It's just that I'm suddenly craving the wine from the capital." Only then did the scholarly official take a seat, and he said in a forlorn voice, "It's a pity that the Li clan has already moved to the capital. Otherwise, we could ask clan leader Li Hong for assistance. If he can pull some strings for us behind the scenes, then it'll become a lot easier for us to carry out our work. Our clan is on good terms with the branch of the Li clan in the capital, so if they can put in a word for us, then the branch of Li clan in this town would definitely have to lend us a hand." Wu Yuan turned to him with a stern expression as he scolded, "Are you an idiot? The connections harnessed by your clan don't equate to your connections. Each time you use your clan's connections, your status in your clan will take a huge hit. This is not something as simple as requesting a piece of calligraphy from someone, so you better not do anything stupid. I was just worried that you wouldn't be able to get over this, so I was trying to cheer you up," the scholarly secretary said with a smile. An amused smile appeared on Wu Yuan's face. "If I'm the type of person to get hung up on things like this, then I would have already broken that pillar general's legs and eloped with his daughter." The entire room fell silent in the wake of this declaration. The scholarly secretary was having to suppress his laughter as he said, "I suggest you only make boastful statements like these in private, Master Wu." Wu Yuan leaned against the back of his chair, and not only was he not annoyed in the slightest at being exposed, he smiled as he replied, "Of course. If my father-in-law were to actually visit me now, I would have already sprung out of my chair to fetch him some tea. Upon my return, I would ask him if he's tired and if he requires a shoulder massage." Everyone in the entire room instantly burst into laughter, and even the pair of martial secretaries standing on either side of the entrance outside exchanged an amused glance. In the instant that Wu Yuan sat up straight, everyone in the room unconsciously tensed up a little, waiting with bated breath for what he was about to say next. Wu Yuan said in an unhurried voice, "The Li clan has already moved away, and the Lu clan is determined to sit on the fence and not get involved. The Zhao clan claims that their patriarch is ill, and that they'll only be able to arrive at a decision once their patriarch has recovered. As for the Song clan, that one's the most difficult to deal with. The 4 major surnames on Fortune Street collectively own 10 large dragon kills, and the 2 previously owned by the Li clan have already been passed on to the Wei and Lu clans on Peach Leaf Alley. I want all of you to collate all of the scattered files in the office and construct a chart denoting the connections and relationships between the clans. Let me see just how convoluted this town can be. Even if we can't get the top clans in the town to do our bidding, we can always settle for the clans below them. Aside from the bottom few clans of the 10 clans, there's also the Ma clan, which is quite affluent and has remained unwilling to move to Fortune Street or Peach Leaf Alley as their ancestors stipulated against doing so. They own 2 dragon kills, and seeing as I'm currently serving as the kiln supervision official, I get to decide on the scale of all of the dragon kills. I'll provide assistance to all of the clans willing to assist us, and at the same time, I'll invest as much as what's needed to complete our objectives, even if that means exhausting all of the kiln supervision office's savings. They may be able to keep the mountain of porcelain, but given how large the immortal tomb is, there's inevitably going to be a disagreement on how the place is split up among the clans, and when that happens, we'll be able to swoop in. They can kick me around as they please now, but once everything comes falling down around them, those sly old foxes will have to scramble to apologize to me. This should have been a rousing declaration from Wu Yuan, but instead of being reinvigorated, he heaved a forlorn sigh before slumping back against his chair again. I can't keep living like this. When is this torture going to come to an end? Teacher, where are the beautiful women willing to offer me their laps to rest on? All of the women in the entire office are either old hags or children. There's not a single woman of the right age in sight. Aren't the women here supposed to be more beautiful than anywhere else? Right at this moment, Cui Chan arrived, only to be stopped outside the entrance of the room by the pair of martial secretaries. A smile appeared on his face as he jibed. Master Wu, how about I write a letter to Pillar General Yuan and ask him if he can send those two adorable little maidservants of yours here from the capital? Wu Yuan immediately rose to his feet, and he couldn't expose the fact that his teacher was the imperial preceptor, nor did he have the guts to put on an act and loudly denounce his teacher. At the same time, he was feeling quite perplexed, wondering why his teacher had come to pay him a visit, and why it appeared that he didn't mind having his identity exposed. Cui Chan couldn't be bothered to speak to Wu Yuan's secretaries, and he merely turned as he instructed. Come with me. Wu Yuan gestured for everyone in the room to remain quiet, then quickly made his way out of the room. The two martial secretaries wanted to accompany him, but he waved them off and continued on his own. Making his way down a quiet stone path, Cui Chan asked, Have those prisoners from the Lu clan already entered the mountains? Wu Yuan shook his head in response. There are 600 prisoners who are still yet to reach the entrance of the northernmost Divine Lord Mountain. These people are the most noble of the prisoners, and most of them are descendants of powerful and wealthy figures in the Lu Empire. They're also quite young, ranging somewhere between 14 to 20 years of age. A perplexed look then appeared on Wu Yuan's face as he asked, Didn't you organize all of this in advance, teacher? Plans can change, all right? Cui Chan snapped. Right now, I'm like a flood dragon stranded on the shore, so I have to confirm these details with you. Drop everything you're doing now and make a trip to the entrance of Divine Lord Mountain as quickly as possible. Find a prisoner by the name of Xia Yulu and organize for him to be sent to the capital. The ones escorting the prisoners to Dragon Spring County are all Song Chongjing's most trusted subordinates. Those unruly soldiers owe no allegiance to me. Would they be willing to let Xia Yulu go on my request? Wu Yuan asked in a cautious manner. Cui Chan waved a hand in an impatient manner as he replied, I've already paved the way for you. All you need to do is show up there. Will you be all right, teacher? Wu Yuan asked in a concerned voice. I'll live. Cui Chan snapped. With that, Wu Yuan didn't hesitate any longer, immediately calling upon his two martial secretaries to depart with him on horseback. Following Wu Yuan's departure, Cui Chan made his way down the path alone with a grim look on his face as he murmured to himself, Just a single misstep has sent the entire situation spiraling out of control. I haven't lost yet, but my plan has completely collapsed. No matter. As long as there's still a slim chance at victory, that'll suffice. I'll just treat this as an experience to polish and refine my mental state. If worst comes to worst, I'll just have to switch to a completely new plan. I've already managed to outlast both teacher and Qi Jingchan, haven't I? Hold on, now that I think about it, that makes me sound like a cowardly turtle. In the end, Cui Chan heaved a forlorn sigh. Her luck is as exceptional as ever. Why did she have to come here at this particular time? Now that she's entered the frame, the only thing I can do is try to salvage as many pawns from this endgame as possible. Otherwise, she'll take everything. I can't believe this. If someone were to pass by the entrance of the kiln supervision office at this moment, they would be able to hear Cui Chan loudly speaking to himself from afar. I'm not mad. There's no point for me to get mad over something like this. That's right, there's no point. Fuck that. How can I not be mad? I'm furious. At the blacksmith shop, 3 brand new bamboo chairs of a vibrant green color were placed under the eaves. Ruan Xiu had already stormed away in a fit of rage, leaving behind Master Ruan and the woman who had visited Clay Vase Alley earlier, and neither of them displayed any reaction to Ruan Xiu's departure. On the bank of the creek in the distance stood Yang Hua, Su Hunran and Wang Yifu. Seated on the bamboo chair, the woman withdrew her gaze from Ruan Xiu's departing figure. She had intentionally played a little trick to infuriate Ruan Xiu and drive her away. Now that she was alone with Ruan Xiu, she finally revealed the reason for her visit. Was there an agreement between you and Mr. Qi, Master Ruan? Is that why Chen Ping'an is being accompanied by those martial artists from the Li clan? No, Ruanqiong replied in a direct and straightforward manner. In that case, have you agreed to protect Chen Ping'an because of those 3 mountains that he purchased next to yours? The woman asked. Ruanqiong nodded in response. That's right. I promised him that no harm would befall him before he left the Great Li Empire. The woman raised her head to look up at the sky, and the dark clouds up above indicated that a storm was coming. How about this, Master Ruan? I'll get someone to purchase the 4 mountains around Divine Elegance Mountain, then present them to you as a gift from our Great Li Empire. A cold sneer appeared on Ruanqiong's face as he scoffed. You're telling me you need to spend money to buy those mountains? Those pouches of gold essence copper coins go out one hand and go in the other for the Emperor of the Great Li Empire anyway, so why take the extra step? The woman shook her head with a smile as she replied, Rules are rules. I'm not exactly someone who likes to abide by rules, but your rules and His Majesty's rules are ones that I must abide by. I certainly wouldn't dare to proclaim that I'm a good person, but I've always acted within my capabilities. Ruanqiong offered no comment on this. Instead, he asked, Why do you insist on killing that boy? Why are you in such a hurry to kill him that you're willing to incur such a massive cost to yourself? Why can't you wait until after he's left the Great Li Empire? The woman's voice remained calm and mellow, but there was a firm look in her eyes as she declared, He has to die. Once he's dead, even if that Baldy is right and karma really does exist, that won't matter. The death of his father and the fact that we used him to help Moore secure more fated opportunities, all of that will end with me. It's because you have some type of mystical ability that can't see the light of day capable of severing karma. Right? Ruanqiong asked in an indifferent voice. The woman merely smiled in response, neither confirming nor denying this. Ruanqiong shook his head as he continued. Even so, that still doesn't explain why you're in such a hurry to kill him. Moore is about to reach the capital soon. Once he arrives, a massive fated opportunity will befall him, so in order to avoid unforeseen mishaps, I must eliminate everything that could pose a hindrance to him. The woman could see that Ruanqiong was completely unmoved by this explanation, so she had no choice but to be candid with him and reveal the secret circumstances involved. If the knot in Moore's heart were present in the average cultivator, it would be of very little consequence. The pursuit of the Great Tao is a lengthy endeavor, so even if he can't untie that knot before he reaches the middle 5 tiers, there will be ways through which the Great Li Empire can forcibly eradicate the knot through external forces. Even in the worst-case scenario, that would only leave behind an inner demon of indeterminate power, which would make his breakthrough to the upper 5 tiers extremely perilous. However, the fated opportunity in the capital won't wait for anyone, so it must be capitalized on now. On top of that, that idiot Chui Chan lost, despite all his claims that he had already foreseen everything. It's clear that he wasn't able to tarnish that boy's purity, so I have no choice but to resort to the second best option, which would be to present Chen Ping'an's head to Moore in order to salvage his mental state. A resigned look appeared on the woman's face as she continued. I've considered deceiving Moore by telling him that Chen Ping'an failed to pass Chui Chan's examination and was ultimately reduced to a petty vulgarian. I had even stitched together a perfect story down to the finest of details to support this lie, but I can't afford to take such a risk. If Moore really does possess sufficiently exceptional aptitude to obtain that fated opportunity, then the truth will be like a blade constantly hanging over his head. If he ever finds out what really happened, then there's a very good chance that his Tao heart could collapse in an instant. All of a sudden, the heavy storm that had been threatening to arrive finally fell. Ruanqiong paid no heed to the heavy rain falling outside as he asked, what kind of knot in his heart could be this troublesome to address? That bastard old man Yao screwed me over and told that boy the truth. Of course, anyone with half a brain would be able to figure out that there's no way his parents would be unable to enter the cycle of reincarnation just because he was born on the 5th day of the 5th month. At this point, the boy had already broken his vow to his mother, and after learning the truth, he rushed back to the town from the dragon kiln like a madman. Do you know what he did after that? He didn't go and seek out Moore, nor did he return home. Instead, he waited outside Clay Vase Alley until Moore was out alone, and only then did he pounce. He cornered Moore and forced him against a wall, almost strangling him to death. Of course, he wasn't able to kill Moore in the end, And even if that had been his intention, he would have been the only one that died. Those accursed spies were watching from the shadows this entire time as all of this happened, but they insisted on abiding by the rules set by His Majesty, which stated that they couldn't intervene unless Moore died. Those idiots deserved to be executed 10,000 times over for their incompetence. The woman did her best to remain as calm as possible as she revealed this secret to Ruan Qiong, following which a rare hint of exhaustion and resignation appeared on her face. How could such an insidious, filthy mutt possibly exist in this world? His actions became the biggest knot in Moore's heart, one that's virtually impossible to resolve. Throughout all these years since then, Moore would often wake up in the middle of the night from dreams of that incident. He was never able to understand why Chen Ping'an didn't kill him on that day, and why he had only chosen to strike when Ji Gui wasn't with him. Moore told me that if he had been in Chen Ping'an's place, he would have torn Chen Ping'an to shreds, and ideally, he would have done so in front of all of Chen Ping'an's loved ones. Ultimately, I suppose I'm partially to blame for all of this. Rain was pelting down onto the ground, much like the tears of the two children in the aftermath of that incident. Song Jisun had been slumped on the ground, grabbing at his own throat with his hands as he bawled his eyes out in fear. Meanwhile, Chen Ping'an had made his way into Clay Vase Alley while weeping into his forearm. After a long silence, the woman set that train of thought aside, and after a brief hesitation she asked, "I'm sure you have your guesses about what happened at the covered bridge, right?" Ruan Qiong's face was etched with resentment as he spat through gritted teeth. "If I had known all of this, I wouldn't have come here." The woman raised an eyebrow as she declared, "That's why before Moore left the town, he had to go and offer incense there. He's only in the position that he's in today because one member of the Great Li Empire's imperial family has dropped dead after another. Every single stroke of each character on the plaque above the covered bridge that reads, 'Rising winds crashing water,' equates to the loss of one life. And it's the sacrifices of those lives that granted him everything he has right now." There was a dark look on Ruan Qiong's face, and he seemed to have no intention of saying anything further. The woman slowly rose to her feet with an intense look in her eyes, and she looked down at Ruan Qiong as she said in a low and alluring voice, "Master Ruan, if you feel like 4 mountains isn't worth breaking your promise to that boy, then that's fine. State your price and we can negotiate. For example, after I return to the capital, I can convince His Majesty to do everything in his power to help your daughter attain her Dao Attainment Catalyst. I don't know what her Dao Attainment Catalyst is, but I can promise you on His Majesty's behalf that the Great Li Empire will help her in every way possible. Aside from myself, Imperial Preceptor Cui Chan and even Song Chongjing can all lend Ruan Xiu their assistance in the attainment of her Dao Attainment Catalyst. From now on, do not set foot within a 500-kilometer radius of Dragon Spring County," Ruan Qiong said in an indifferent voice. "If I ever see you encroaching upon this area, then don't blame me for casting aside my chivalry and beating a woman." The woman heaved a faint sigh. "Fine. I'll just have to wait until he gets to the border of the Great Li Empire then." While she was making her way down the steps, Ruan Qiong suddenly said, "The chair you just sat on was made by Chen Ping'an." The woman faltered slightly upon hearing this, and she intentionally misconstrued what Ruan Qiong was trying to convey as she asked with a seductive smile, "Are you trying to say that he's indirectly touched my bottom?" The woman burst into laughter as she strode straight into the storm, allowing herself to be soaked by the rain. Through her drenched clothes, her seductive curves were laid bare for all to see, but Ruan Qiong was looking away from her in an expressionless manner. Yet another heavy storm arrived. By the time Chen Ping'an made his way onto the summit of the mountain, he discovered Aoyang standing with his back facing him, and he was in the process of slowly returning his bamboo saber to its scabbard. After the blade was sheathed, Aoyang turned around with a bright smile as he said, "Prior to coming here, I met a young martial artist who was far more interesting than you are. I often heard him reciting a poetic phrase, and it really resonated with me, so why don't you have a listen as well? It goes, whenever I see injustice in this world, the sword in my heart begins to quiver." Aoyang slowly made his way toward Chen Ping'an as he continued. "Having said that, I'm not some hero who feels inclined to stand up against injustice. I simply feel like this poetic phrase is very fitting to be recited after killing people in this type of weather. There are 2 reasons why I came to find you, the first of which is to collect the sword nurturing gourd along the way, while the second is for that hairpin you're wearing." I'd say the latter is about 100 times more important than the former. On the hill behind Aoyang laid a pair of bodies that were resting peacefully, and both of them were among the most powerful martial artists and cultivators of the Great Li Empire. Who are you? Chen Ping'an asked. The man continued to make his way slowly toward Chen Ping'an with his palm resting on the hilt of his saber, and he stopped after arriving in front of Chen Ping'an, then lifted his conical bamboo hat as he smiled and replied, "My name is Aoyang, Liang as in kindness."